There are people in this world who are known to make great impacts, like Gandhi, Thomas Edison, Aristotle, and Steve Jobs. And if you're anything like me, man, you're completely fascinated with Steve Jobs, but you maybe haven't done your research about Steve Jobs to know that maybe he wasn't the greatest person in the world. So does that mean that we're promoting people we don't actually know? Or does that mean that we're promoting lives where, we should be like passive people? Join me today as I dive into the film and the person, Steve Jobs. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Thank You for Sharing. I know, it's been some time, but life has been lifing. Like that is as simple as I could say it. But I appreciate you all for just taking time to listen to this video or to watch this video. Like, I'm greatly appreciative. Anybody in my close life know, as of lately, I have been just like so obsessed with like great thinkers. I've been obsessed with Walt Disney and Steve Jobs. Now, my obsession comes for these people because these people are people who have wielded things from their mind into reality. And we live in a world where a lot of people can call you crazy if you have like this crazy or this just idea that's outside the box. But then we have people like Walt Disney and Steve Jobs who are also like, people have called them crazy, but they didn't let that determine their life. And they still was able to accomplish their dreams. So I've been kind of learning from these people because honestly and truthfully, I want to learn like what it takes, like these dreams I have in my head. Like, what does it take for me to really like get them out? So I'm not the only person who, these ideas benefit. I like to think they're great ideas, but anyway. So naturally, I've done my research in ways that I enjoy. I've been listening to audiobooks and I've been watching film on these people. And I happened to come across this film called Steve Jobs. Now, if you're familiar with Steve Jobs or any of the films about Steve Jobs, there's like two. There's one starring Ashton Kutcher, and this one, which is starring Michael Fassbender. This movie is so special because it focused in on the relationship of Steve Jobs and his daughter. Now, if you saw the first Steve Jobs movies with Ashton Kutcher, that was much more about his, I guess, professional life. But this one is a little bit more about his personal life, which to me is more interesting because I'm like, you can have these great ideas and everything, but how are you to be around? And, Steve Jobs, iPhone, I'm filming off an iPhone right now. He's done so much for this society, but brother wasn't known to be the nicest person in the room. And people would talk about how, bad of a person he could be. Aaron Sorkin, the guy who wrote this movie, he used this book, this like popular autobiography with Steve Jobs. It's kind of like material. And he admitted like the more he dived into this book and who Steve Jobs was, the more he was kind of like, why are we celebrating this guy? This guy is a deadbeat. This guy is horrible to the people that's around him. But, but granted, like, I'm not bashing Steve Jobs. Like, Steve Jobs have done things and his motive and his ways of thinking has definitely pushed society. So maybe it takes a person being those things in order for us to really push the envelope on society. But most importantly, this movie kind of focuses on Jobs' relationship with his daughter, Lisa. But over the span of this movie, we kind of see the little parts about Jobs that we've heard about if you've done your research about Jobs. And one thing was the abandonment of his daughter, Lisa. Like, Lisa was his first child, and he absolutely didn't claim her, despite naming one of the first Apple computers, Lisa. And so when you open up in this movie, it starts with that scene where he kind of meets his estranged daughter that he is not claiming. He is taking the mother like through court. And even though DNA shows that he's the father, he still has not stepped up to the plate to be the father. But however, this computer is named somewhat after his daughter. So when in the movie, when the daughter mentions how the computer is named after her, Steve Jobs then explains to his daughter that the fact that the Lisa computer is named Lisa is only coincidentally, and it has nothing to do with his daughter or with her, as a matter of fact. And that Lisa stands for locally integrated software architecture, and that it has nothing to do with her. Like, if you're watching this movie, like any relationship, forget jobs, anything like that, when you see someone who wants the love of their father gets crushed by their own father, part of you is like, wow, this person is not the best person. But as the scene continues, he begins to take interest in this painting that Lisa, his daughter, is making on the Lisa. And one thing that Jobs was really big about was intersecting art and technology. And that was something that people told him that, no, bro, you can't do that. Like those are two separate entities. And it kind of was like a realization, a very weird realization. But in this movie, the character of Steve Jobs, he kind of begins to become infatuated with his daughter, but also infatuated with the fact that the Mac could create art. And I think it was very important to this character, Steve Jobs. I don't know about the real life Steve Jobs, but this character, Steve Jobs, that for once, everything that he was doing in his work career meant nothing, and he could finally kind of focus on his daughter, or he kind of remembered like what he was doing it for. But this movie explores a lot of things. It explores his relationship with his daughter, but also his relationship with John Scully, who was the acting like CEO at Apple the time that, Jobs got kicked out of Apple, which is crazy because he started the company and they kicked him out of his own company. Me personally, after listening to the audiobook but kind of watching this movie, you see that this Steve Jobs shares a lot of qualities with the actual Steve Jobs, but this is a very fairy tale element of it. I'm not saying that it didn't happen this way, but it didn't happen this way. But I think this movie does a great job of showing how cold Steve Jobs could have been at times, but also how warm he was as a person. Like, as much as many people talk about how awful he was, they talked about how he could be charming on demand. Like like this is crazy. And what really surprises me about this whole Steve Jobs thing, including this film, is like when you hear people talk about anybody who's done great things in this world, they're not really mentioning, you know, who they are as a person. They're mentioning their accolades. So it's like in my mind, Steve Jobs was like this cool guy who was like just very supportive of everybody and who just put out ideas that changed the world. I didn't know this man was like known for being like a horrible person. And ultimately, I'm not saying that he's a horrible person, but no one, what I'm really saying is that no one really focused in or talk about these horrible aspects that he has. And I'm not saying that to bring him down, but if you're like me and you're trying to navigate how to build success, or you're trying to navigate how to just kind of like be a free thinker, or really, be sure your ideas, you're looking into people like Jobs because you want to be able to take something from it. But I was surprised when people talked about this man's character. And it kind of makes you wonder to yourself, like, man, do I have to act this way to get my idea across? Do I have to proceed like this to kind of change the world? And ultimately, I think the answer to it is no. I would say that. But I think the important part about this movie is it explores the human side of Steve Jobs. And what that kind of lets me know is that, I mean, honestly, bro, it lets me know that we're still human, right? And that you have to be very careful about only being tunnel vision when it comes to things in your life that you really want to achieve. And there's times in this movie where you see Jobs and you're just like, you might be screaming at your TV like, bro, how can you not be a better dad? It explores how the one time where his daughter Lisa got into Harvard, that he was like, I'm not even going to pay for your tuition, because he was so caught up on the fact that her mom was selling the house, and Jobs wanted his daughter to say something to his mom about like just things that his daughter couldn't control. And so there's parts of this film where you begin to kind of question, is it worth it? Is it worth to focus on certain things that you're not focusing on the greater things in life? And ultimately, I don't know that answer. I don't know the answer to that question. There were a lot of things in Steve Jobs' life that could be viewed as good or bad. One thing in particular, he was known for having this field of reality distortion. And what that means is there would be times where, let's say that he wanted something done with like a computer, and people told him that's absolutely not done. You even see in the film, this guy comes to him and he's like, we're not able to get this computer to speak on itself. We won't be able to show that during this show. And he absolutely goes like, no, you have to get it done. You will get it done. And part of you is kind of like, okay, bro, this guy is kind of like evil. Like you genuinely kind of look to yourself and be like, yo, like, bro, are you good? But ultimately you begin to kind of think to yourself like, dang, man, is it worth pushing people beyond their capacity of what they think they could do to achieve something so much greater? It's almost like, are we so focused on the bad parts of a certain person if they push people beyond their levels and beyond their limits? As much as there were times where, Steve Jobs pushing definitely got him in trouble, ultimately, there's time where maybe he could have elevated people around him who was maybe limited by their own thinking. Because there's a lot of things that Steve Jobs has done which were known to be impossible. And ultimately, I think that you should think to yourself, like even with this podcast, even with certain things in my life, am I holding myself back? Should I be my own Steve Jobs? I'm not saying go out here and show any self-hate towards yourself or go out here and just tell somebody, keep on hitting this rock until it turns to a car. Like, there are some things that are impossible, but should we be motivating ourselves to push past limits that we think that we can't get past? Honestly, the answer to that is yes. There's a lot of things that I admire about Steve Jobs because he was very known for talking about wanting to have an A team. He didn't want to deal with people on the B team or anything like that. And what that means is he just wanted the best of the very best. And there's a lot of times throughout his story and throughout his dealings with people where if they didn't even felt like they deserved to be at Apple or they didn't deserve to be around him, then ultimately they weren't. And I think that we should all have this certain type of naiveness about ourselves. I won't even call it naiveness, but we should have this certain kind of like intentions about ourselves. We should think we can do the impossible. I don't know what this podcast holds for me. I have no idea, especially since I can't stay consistent, but I genuinely don't know what it has for me. But the limiting thought is, man, don't record because nobody gonna watch that anyway. Nobody gonna support you. You're not gonna make millions off of this. And blah, 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 that could be true, but isn't it more hurting when you yourself are having those thoughts or you having those limiting thoughts? Like, why do we limit our own brains? I hear stories of like Steve Jobs, and when I think to myself, or this reality field of distortion is like, yo, maybe I should have a form of that in my life, and maybe I should have it for the people that are around me. I'm not saying I should push the envelope because ultimately I'm not Steve Jobs. There will never be another Steve Jobs, but how can I apply him to my life? And also, there's points where I could really apply things that he didn't do right. He wasn't a good family person. He was so fixated on his things. But one thing I can say that I admire about Steve Jobs, that at least how they tell stories, it was never about the money. He was so fixated on just pushing ideas and genuinely wanting the world. And he kind of was one of the first people who kind of showed people what they needed, not what they wanted. And in a time where the Apple came up, that was absurd. You gave people things based on their preferences. You never gave them things on stuff you thought they would like. But Apple did that. But also, like I said, he wasn't a great family man. So maybe find elements in your life how you can step that up. I ultimately believe in I want to find a balance to where I could grind and I could live my dreams, but I don't want it at the cost of friends and family. And I think it's possible. Steve Jobs, and even this movie, because it's just a combination of who he is as a person, but ultimately, it just taught me to be your own person. Learn to follow your own dreams. If you genuinely have a dream, and I preach this message so many times, I sound like a broken recorder, but be so naive about your dreams. I tell people all the time, like, I want to hit the ground running when I'm young and I'm not damaged by the world, because there are people who are damaged by this world. If you don't have your own field of reality distortion, be careful with that. You need to be in reality, but there needs to be a certain emphasis on that to kind of get certain things done in your life, even if it's just with yourself. Even if you got to lie to yourself and you got to tell yourself, bro, don't hold yourself back, really kind of change the way you think. I don't think everyone is meant to be a free thinker. And I don't think free thinking is like a certain definition of something. I think you can have your own version of that. But what does it look like if you were to follow your dream and you didn't care what anybody would say? Because ultimately, if Steve Jobs listened to the people who doubted him and say he couldn't do something, we wouldn't be here clowning people for having Androids. But nah, for real, like, we wouldn't have Apple. And Apple is the top company in the world. Now we could argue like, all right, bro, have we reached that limit? I got a whole video about if technology is good for us or not. But ultimately, we could see the fruits of his labor. But there's a lot of things directed at Jobs in this movie that's telling him what you make isn't supposed to be the greatest thing about you, like material wise. There's a part in this movie where his right hand woman, who's been there throughout the whole time, is not his wife, she works with him, but she ultimately just tells him what you make is not supposed to be the greatest thing about you. Be a father to your kid, nurture these relationships. I do think it's balance. The balance is key. But many people who are successful can tell you, or at least from what I've heard, I haven't experienced it myself, but many people can tell you that success does not equal happiness. If you're not taking time out to enjoy the right now. And I can speak to that right now, dog. I've been going through so much. There's been so much things that have not been going the way that I wanted. And I'm always so fixated on okay, this job will make me happy, or if my career here flourish will make me happy. But what about right now? What can I find right now to simply enjoy? I think every person who has achieved success, the most fun part about achieving that success is the journey onto that success. And I don't want to be so blinded by having my eyes fixated on one thing that I'm not enjoying moments that I could be enjoying now, because it's moments like this that really keeps you fired up. I'm fired up now. Dude, y'all don't know what I've been dealing with the last couple of months, or this week. And so I just decided to just hop on and have a conversation because I'm fired up. I don't know where certain things are headed for me. And I think it's okay. I think ultimately, I'm not stressing out and be oh my God, I don't know what I want to do with my life. But I'm learning to kind of understand that it's okay if certain things don't work out for you right now. I'm not sure if you're a religious person and you're watching this, you believe in God, I don't know. But, I most certainly do. And I feel something I saw today was whenever God builds something, it takes time, right? A lot of people can agree fast money leaves as soon as it comes as fast. You don't have no concept of working for that. I think maybe our lives are the same concept. Me, myself, man, I want a movie deal. I want my podcast to instantly blow up, and I quit my 9 to 5, and I want all these things to happen for me. But I think ultimately, if it were to happen, I don't know how happy I'll be. I don't know if I would increase my imposter syndrome. I genuinely don't know. So really, what I'm in a phase in my life, and hold me to it. If you know me, hold it to me. If you don't know me, hold me to it. But I'm definitely in a phase in my life where I'm just trying to focus on what can I do that is extremely basic. like self-discipline or stuff like what can I do right now that could cater to my dreams? I have to learn how to schedule more. I have to learn how to schedule more so I could be more consistent when it comes to filming these. Like I really genuinely want to be consistent, but there's times where I hop on or times I psych myself out and be like, no one wants to hear what I got to say. No one wants to hear any of this. Nobody's gonna watch this. But those are thoughts that are not true. I mean, you watched it. Shout out to you. But I'm saying that to say, really become your own personal Steve Jobs or for the people around you. I'm not saying curse people off when they piss you off, because I mean he definitely did. But learn to take things from his life and ultimately this film and kind of apply it to your life. See where it can get you if you just kind of created your own field of distortion and you kind of just told yourself like, I'm not gonna allow things to happen this way. I'm not gonna become victim to my own mind. Like I really need to like lock down and really lock in. Every day not gonna be a good day, that's granted. But ultimately just learn what to take for yourself and then learn what to leave. And I think that everyone should be looking at their heroes in their lives and really seeing like who influences me. How can I learn more about these people? So I think I learned from Jay Shetty's podcast, or he was saying like one thing he likes to do is like really look at his heroes and read about his heroes, because once they've hit a wall in their life, like how have they gotten over that wall? I think it's very dangerous, because sometimes I'd be like, if I was gonna write a book, I wonder if I'm gonna write about this moment. Like that's a little self-conceited. I just think I just need to focus on what my life is and kind of like focus on the now instead of me already being like, oh, what my book like, because tomorrow's not promised. I've said that all the time. It's not. So you got to learn to kind of go after your goals, but finding little things that you could be smart about now and finding things you can enjoy now and enjoying the people around you now, and also just enjoying your heroes and hearing their stories and figuring out what to take, and understand that you don't have to be these people. You don't have to be a horrible person. You don't have to not claim your daughter and then name a computer after her. You don't have to be that person. You could be your own version of a deadbeat. I'm just kidding. You could be your own version ultimately. And that's essentially everything I wanted to say. So thank you for watching, and be tuned, because I got a couple of ideas for what I think the next couple of episodes going to be. So be prepared. And thank you for riding around. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And thank you for being a part of this. And thank you for sharing. Chris out.